You're listening to Crashes, Claims, and Clarity, hosted by Darrell Burrow, a Georgia-based personal injury attorney with over 30 years of experience and founder of Burrow & Associates. With a background in both legal strategy and compassionate client care, Darrell has helped over 10,000 individuals and families navigate life after injury. Guided by his Christian faith and a deep sense of justice, he brings expert insight, personal stories, and powerful interviews to every episode. If you're looking for truth, support, and clarity in the aftermath of an accident, this is your place. This is Crashes, Claims, and Clarity.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Crashes, Claims, and Clarity. I am your host, Darrell Burrow. I'm an attorney here in the state of Georgia. We're headquartered here in Gwinnett County in Duluth, but serving the entire state. And I thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Today we're going to be talking about workplace injuries. Most people, after one of these, they kind of focus on the accident itself. Maybe it's a fall or a lifting injury or something that's repetitive, certainly all unexpected. But what happens after these injuries can oftentimes leave a greater impact than the injury itself. Today's guest brings a unique perspective because he's seen this from multiple angles. Recovery, communication, documentation, return to work decisions, even an employer's support can play a major role in a person's recovering successfully, returning to work successfully. And that's what we'll be talking about today. Justin DeSandre, a commercial insurance executive in Alpharetta with Brown & Brown. He specializes in risk management and workplace safety. But before entering that industry, Justin spent nearly 7 years as a physical therapist himself and a clinic director. And from that angle, he treated actual injured workers and helped them recover from job-related injuries. This firsthand experience on that end of the spectrum gives him a unique understanding of what happens when injuries occur and what goes on both with employees and employers, and seeing that from both perspectives. Well, Justin, welcome to Crashes, Claims, and Clarity.
Thank you for having me, Darren. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, listen, before we get into the injuries and recovery, tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get from, physical therapy over to commercial insurance?
Sure. It's a bit of a winding road. It's funny, if anybody ever does a deep dive on my LinkedIn, they'll see that I've held positions very varied throughout my history. But from my end, personally, I was a University of Georgia graduate, came out of school, was targeting medical school originally, and in the meantime, while going through the medical school application process, actually got a job as a personal lines underwriter. So would essentially be considered a referee for an insurance company, and did that for just shy of 2 years. So I'd had some prior insurance experience before going into physical therapy. Went to graduate school for physical therapy, got my doctorate in PT from the University of North Georgia, practiced as a clinician for 7 years, varying roles, staff PT, clinic director, eventually wound up in a touch of talent acquisition. And so had some university relationships inside of that space. And so from my end, it's been an interesting journey because for me, I accomplished 98% of what I look to accomplish inside the physical therapy world. I had opportunities to work on research. I led teams. I had a role that allowed me to travel. And so I hit all the check boxes I wanted to hit. And unfortunately, it left me still wanting. There was something missing from that element. And so as I started looking into different ways and different avenues that I could pursue, I've always had an attraction to the entrepreneurial and business aspect of what whatever profession I end up in. And so inside of that space, I started looking into other avenues through whatever network I had developed at that point. And I actually came across my current workplace now, which is Brown & Brown. And so have made the transition over there. It's been not without its own set of challenges, I'll say. There's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. It was done in physical therapy school. It's been done in insurance. It's drinking from a fire hose. Very much like that. You just kind of stick your face in it and catch what you can as you go along.
How many years have you been with Brown & Brown?
I have just crossed the year mark right now.
Okay. All right. Well, in your years as a physical therapist, what did you see as the most common workplace injury?
Of course, anything spine related, truthfully. And it's if you ask most of our outpatient physical therapists, which was the role that I primarily held, that's what we saw a lot of. Spine probably comprised 8 of our patient volume. And whether that's repetitive use, whether that was singular acute injury, there were multifaceted versions of it. But if we were going to boil it down to truthfully a singular area or body region, spine was almost exclusively it.
Okay. And what about treating those workers? Did that teach you that maybe most people and maybe even employers don't fully understand about the recovery process?
So I think the thing that is tough is that oftentimes the employer and the employee seem to be on opposite ends when it comes to return to work. And there's some very difficult conversations that have to be had during that time frame. And so during that, recognizing that neither party is getting what they want if they end up on opposite sides that's not going to be an effective way for anybody to come to any sort of resolution or satisfaction of the situation. And unfortunately, the physical therapist or treating provider, whoever may be involved from the medical side, often end up being the mediator in that situation of, well, how are they doing functionally? Do they have strength? Where's their pain level? In attempting to provide some amount of objectivity to this situation that is varied throughout that. Because when we talk about pain is a very complex process inside the body. It requires multiple pieces to be involved.
Right.
Not only perception of injury, but also how does the brain process it? So then we talk about emotions, we talk about stress, we talk about how is their overall diet? Are they sleeping? So you've got 8, 9, 10 different factors that we're calculating into here and going, okay, as a provider, how can I deliver them to the end result, which is get them functionally able to return to work where we're not going to make them worse or more damaged than they already are. And I think that's where the art of all of this sort of came in. And so navigating through that process has always been a little difficult.
Okay. Many people assume the medical bill is the biggest consequence, or that's what they focus on the most. We've heard you say that isn't necessarily true. What do you think the hidden costs are as people follow up with recovery?
It's an interesting impact inside of that, and it's almost a ripple effect is the way I would call it, because absolutely inside of these workplace injuries, when they happen, we are hyper focused on the individual and the person that it's happened to and their role within their respective business that they operate in. But beyond that, there's implications beyond just medical related expenses. Yes, there's time away from work. Yes, there's assistance maybe needed around the home as they return to function, whatever that may be. But then beyond that, as you look to the other side, there's also impact of lost production inside of the employer space. What sort of impact does that take on the rest of the team that this employee works with? Very rarely are we truly isolated incidents inside of workplace injury. You see the impact that this occurs into 10, 15, 20 different people that may be involved in this process, because that workload oftentimes doesn't just disappear. So not only do you have the impact of, hey, here's the medical expense component of what's going on, but also what is the impact to potential lost revenue, lost production, whatever it may be on that side from the employer's perspective that they're balancing as well. So there's some immediate impact to the profit and loss sheet that you look at, but it's also almost a trailing impact that'll impact for multiple weeks beyond when the initial injury occurred.
Yeah, yeah. What about any examples where that came into play? Maybe it was even a minor injury. Obviously, no names, but
Sure.
any examples you can think of, something that just blew out of proportion.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the best ones that sits in my mind that I often use is, and you don't want to be a boogeyman in this situation. I think it's really easy to come in and everything sounds doom and gloom, right? But we had a situation where I had a worker who had been injured lifting a box in a warehouse just during movement. Standard lifting procedure, nothing particularly special about it. He wasn't trying to show off or, try and be Superman. It was literally just a typical box lift, twist, move to somewhere else. And typical spinal complaint of felt a sharp stab in my back, a very deep radiating pain down the limb, and dealing with implications after that. The problem that occurred with him was that we had a delay in getting him care because he went to urgent care originally. Urgent care gave him typical NSAIDs, no opioid prescription at that point. Said, hey, NSAIDs, ice, rest, take it easy, don't do anything. Okay, pretty typical what we would say for initial response. And this led to further development of compensatory movement. And so inside of that, what started happening is that he started having breakdown of other systems. So what started out originally as low back pain with radiation in the limb turned into now he's got numbness in his foot. Now it's starting to spread to the other limb, and now he's complaining about shoulder pain. So we went from a singular or somewhat constrained area that we were working on to now we've got a whole body system that's now being impacted. And now he's got disrupted sleep pattern. Now he's seeking comfort through food or alcohol or whatever other options may be out there for pain control. And so when you start doing that, it leads to this almost snowball effect of it's really deep of a hole to come out of. And unfortunately with him, despite our best intentions, he actually did wind up with a surgical result inside of that. So he wound up with a spinal fusion, which we just went from, something that was $5,000, maybe $8,000 in total response to what we were doing to now we're multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, and someone that is now who is a relatively young, relatively healthy individual that was doing relatively heavy lifting and without an issue now has a fixated spinal joint that is no longer able to move the way it should be able to move. And so inside of that space, we've now limited him for the rest of his life because we just didn't deliver him to care early enough.
And what you said a minute ago about the extended 8 to 10 other either people or company that is affected, that is a huge ripple effect. Wow. What would you say separates workers who kind of recover successfully and return to work, and those like the example you just gave that just not only struggled but wound up with a life-altering surgery?
Sure. I think there's a couple different factors. There's a we'll call it a not well-held opinion in the medical industry that you hear workers' comp and immediately people are thinking, oh, this person never wants to get back to work. Truthfully, I think that's kind of a sham excuse. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, but frankly, most people want to be doing something. May not be the exact thing they were doing at that moment. I mean, I'm the exact example of that. I've held multiple careers throughout my history. But nonetheless, they want to be doing something productive. They want to be working somehow. And so inside of that, I think showing them a pathway of how to get back to doing something that they want to be able to do is truthfully the key piece of that. And so it takes multiple sides, both from the employer's perspective as well as the employee's perspective. And so there's multiple inflection points that you can look at where you go, if we catch them by this period of time and direct them towards this pathway of care, we head off this awful chronic continual spiral downward that results in surgery and opioid components and everything that goes beyond that. And so when I look at that and we go, okay, how do we avoid having that be our eventual outcome? The piece is earlier intervention with some form of movement expert. Obviously, I'm biased towards a physical therapist because it's what I know, it's what I did, and I've specialization in it. Sure. And truthfully, it could be chiropractor. It could be PT. It could be athletic trainer. It could be your fitness professional next door. I don't care who you go to. Go to someone who's going to help you get moving in some safe fashion that's able to look at your injury and go, hey, here's what happened. Here's what the most likely cause is. Let's get you moving. And to the point of tolerance, truthfully, that's realistically the biggest issue. And it's at the risk of frustrating a significant number of my physical therapy colleagues. I'll go ahead and step on the landmine anyway. Most of our role is to teach people how to tolerate and adapt what they are doing in order to allow them to return to full function. That doesn't mean we want you on crutches forever. You need to wear a brace every time you do something. That's not the end goal. That's more education based around, hey, for the next 2 weeks, we are going to modify like this. Then we're going to check and see how we're doing. And then after that, we're going to modify further or let you go beyond that point. So it's that gradual return to activity that really suggests how we get people better. Obviously, there are scenarios where that's not the case, right? If we've got significant surgical procedure, we're dealing with loss of limb, there's pieces that don't gradual return to activity is not the goal. Right, but for most, when we're talking inside musculoskeletal, we're talking about nervy style injury with that sort of issues, that's where really the approach should be based around.
And as you're mentioning that, in my mind, I'm thinking about, well, even, a minor injury that I've had, I don't know how much I can do, how much I'm supposed to do.
Sure.
I'm afraid I may re-injure the area.
Absolutely.
So those things would tell us that we need a professional to help us explore and answer all those questions.
Sure. And it's all fear reduction. There's a word that gets tossed around in PT. It's called kinesiophobia. Literally translates to fear of movement. That's what we're doing. The brain is a wonderfully complex, differentiated structure that is at best a complex feedback machine. It takes an information, processes it, and goes, okay, if this situation occurs again, what is my response going to be? And teaches you how to do that quicker. So when we're talking about what we're doing, you're reprogramming your brain. You're reprogramming it on how to move, because what the brain is perceived is, hey, an injury has occurred. We're potentially damaging tissues. Here's some pain, so you stop doing whatever you're doing. Great. Awesome. I love that. Now we're going to blunt it with anti-inflammatories. We're going to blunt it with opioid response. And so when we sit inside that space and we essentially feed the brain misinformation of, hey, what you're feeling isn't real, which is not the case. It's real. It's feeling it. It's noticing it. We just need to reframe that to, hey, we don't need as much fear. We're okay. Let's show it that we can do this again and teach it how to move.
Yeah, we've just touched upon, without using the word communication, we've touched upon good communication. How important is that between, the injured party, the worker, the providers, the employer, the insurance company?
Sure. It's paramount, truthfully. There is no such thing as too much information to any one of those parties. And as somebody who's lived on multiple sides of this fence, because again, everybody loves to go adversarial on it. It's us versus them, me versus my employer, insurance companies are the bad guys, whoever we want to demonize that day, right? I think at the end of the day, most of the issues that we deal with is poor communication. Now, some of these are a touch of a genie came out of the bottle and toothpaste is out of the tube. You can't really put it back in once it occurs. Certain ways that either policies are built, return to work functions have been established inside of employee handbooks, different things like that. If those aren't addressed on the front end, you can't really fix it on the back end except to say, hey, we're going to do better this time. Here's how we're going to pilot this. But when it comes to communication side of stuff, being as open about all of where we're at, what we're seeing functionally, what are the goals that we're trying to get you back to, that's the piece that carries us through everything. And so at the end of the day, we're just as good as the data we put into the system. So if the data is crap, you're going to get crap on the way out.
In your experience, where is the biggest breakdowns? Is that, employer, employee? Is it insurance company?
It lies in multiple camps. And I think it's because we end up competing for what is the purpose of what we're trying to do here. At the end of the day, the employee is trying to get better and feel better. The employer is trying to get them back to work as quickly as possible to get them doing their job or producing or providing some amount of product to them, whatever that may be. The insurance carrier wants that to occur as cheaply and as quickly as possible. So putting those elements all together, sometimes they don't always talk well together with each other. And so the hang up often ends up being multi-layered inside of that. And it's truly because the goals feel like they're competing. In an ideal world, we would never have any of these goals compete against each other. They would all operate in their own independent systems and none of the variables would ever impact each other. It's not the way the world works, whether we like it or not. Unfortunately, the system is not built that way, at least here in the US. We don't have a way around that. We're doing the best of what we can. And so when I look at how do we, where are the limitations inside of this, it really boils down to understanding what are the goals of each of the separate parties and trying to get them to understand that, hey, you're probably not going to get everything that you want, but you can at least get some of it. So let's get some of it for everybody so we can all feel better about this at the end of the day.
Yeah. What mistakes do you see the employer making in the first few days after an injury? And I will interject,
please.
From a legal standpoint, when I take those initial calls, it's always my employer told me to get back to work. What do you see as the employer's mistakes?
Reacting with emotion.
Okay.
And I'm sure you've seen plenty of that on your side as well. When someone gets hurt, it is hard to remain objective. It really is, because pain is it's a psychosocial experience. It is not something that occurs solely in a silo. It is not something that is just solely within your head. It impacts everyone around you in the way that people approach you, because you wear it whether you know it or not. And so inside of that, when we see people in pain, it creates a defensive response. People go, no, I don't want that. That's bad. And then there's panic, and panic sets in. And so we're letting emotion kind of take over everything. I'm not saying employers need to be robots. That's not the goal. There's a way to be empathetic without being emotionally driven. And I think there's a delineation there. And because I think so many employers get hung up on how much is this going to cost me? This guy's trying to cheat me. I just need him back in so we can get things going because I've got whatever deadline I got to accomplish. Yes, those things are important. We care about those. But the mistakes often get made when we rush decisions based upon emotional response. And so truthfully, I need a lot of employers to take a big old deep breath and just breathe for a second. And it sounds woo-woo and it sounds like we're going to go rub some crystals and feel better about it later. That's not what it is. It truthfully is to just slow your brain down a little bit and go, okay, really, what are the important things we need to get done right now? And because truthfully, the first step should be, hey, let's get you the care that you need immediately. And then let's figure out our return to work protocol. Because truthfully, the return to work protocol should be built on the front end. So there should be some amount of a skeleton there.
Okay.
But if you don't have the skeleton on the front end, then you're left flying by the seat of your pants and you're just trying to go, I don't know what I'm doing here, this. And then now we're in legal issues and we're getting in trouble.
What advice would you give to a worker who feels, that pressure to return to work, but maybe they're not physically ready? Maybe they're not ready to admit that they're not physically ready.
Sure. That's a tough one because it's a situation where if you go into work, you've returned to work, and then you get hurt worse again, or you get hurt again, and this time it's worse, that's going to be a bigger issue than a longer delay. However, at the same time, we can't always just delay and keep pushing off the inevitable. There's got to be some amount of return to work that occurs. And so inside of that space, that's where I look to see, is there a way we can do modification of return? And whether that's lighter duty, whether that's altered hours, whether that's altered position. Not that it's, hey, I'm going to have you go sit in an office and go count all the paper clips in that drawer. No. We're not going to give you demeaning work. That's not valuable. That's not adding anything. And it's not within your scope of something that counts as your profession. But I think when we look inside of this and we go, hey, how can we get you comfortable with returning to work? I think some amount of return to standard schedule for you is often the better way to do it. Getting used to getting up and getting going in the morning, having to deal with whatever commute you've got going on, all of that sort of stuff. When we're talking about physical therapy, that's called opening the environment, right? We put you in a clinic and we go, hey, we're going to treat you on a table, then we're going to stand you up, then we're going to put you in a group of people. That is opening the environment. It's adding new variables to it to help you try and test different things. If you continually test yourself at the same level, you're never going to get better, right? So you got to continue to explore outside the boundaries of comfort within reason. And so finding a way to do that with guardrails on is usually the best way to do that. And so that's why we start talking about modified return to work schedules, modified work schedules, things like that, where we can help provide some context for them to get back into the workplace, but do it in a way that they're less likely to re-injure themselves at a greater degree.
Yeah. And are there, problems with having the employer understand that it needs to be modified? I know, they're itching to have the person return. How difficult is that?
Can be incredibly difficult if without pre-work, right? Very similar to if you've ever been in a gym, you don't want to try and deadlift without warming up. You never want to try and get an employer to try and figure out a modified work schedule if they've never done one in the past. So realistically, the time to figure out your modified work schedule is before the injury occurs, not after. And so that's where a lot of the brokering relationship comes in our role with some of that when it comes to dealing with workers' compensation or dealing with workplace safety and those components. There needs to be some form of a modified return to work policy. Does need to be a big, hyper detailed schedule, but there should be some form of a plan out there that they can lean on. Because with that will at least give them guidelines to go, hey, here's what's appropriate, here's what's not, here's how we get our workers back to what they need to do. Because the last thing you want to do is put your worker in the exact same situation what you're talking about, where they feel pressured that they have to return, they're put in a situation they don't want to be in, and they potentially re-injure themselves worse. Because boy, oh boy, did that just go from, oh, we're good, we've got everybody back, to, oh no, now we've got significant claim on our hands.
Right.
That is a much more costly mistake.
What can employers do to, or what can they proactively do to reduce injuries, creating a safer workplace?
Sure. I think there's got to be some amount of communication inside of professional circles with us. And this is where the old adage of networking carries everything. I think too often employers try to be one-man shows and be the singular, profound entity that develops the thing novelly. Realistically, you have competitors in your environment. You typically know who they are. I'm not saying give them business, but what I'm saying is lean on them and go, hey, what do you guys do in the case of workplace injury? Like, what's your plan look like? Talk to the people around you. Ask some of those questions, because more often than not, either they've had a claim and know what to do, they have some form of a plan in place, or they've had an experience where they go, actually, I've never dealt with this, but you know who did, and they'll point you in the right direction. That sort of stuff will carry you further than anything by yourself, because I think there's a tendency now where people lean heavily on AI, lean heavily on plug it into the internet and go, hey, internet, I want to avoid workplace injury. What do I do? And it spits out top 5 topics. That's great. That may have nothing to do with the way your business operates, what is appropriate for your line of business, anything like that. And I'm sure I will have AI crew coming in saying, oh, if you prompt it correctly, and okay, fine. I concede.
It's still join the professional organizations, go to the meetings, do the networking,
Absolutely.
share your questions and share your ideas.
Absolutely.
Good.
That is key.
Good stuff. If there's any business owner listening today, what could they do to improve that process? What 3 things would you say other than, join the organization, go to the meeting, share ideas?
Sure. I've been in leadership roles before, so I'm heavily developed by the leaders that came before me, and I recognize that. So it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's your own style. You do what you need to do, but I've always believed in lead with empathy. So there's got to be some amount of empathy inside that space when you're dealing with workplace injury. At the end of the day, I think most people are trying to be honest. Yeah, you're going to come across somebody that's trying to rip you off. It occurs. But for the most part, I really do think most employees are trying to be honest and trying to do their best. So lead with empathy and trust your people. Number 2, inside of this space, have a plan. If you're trying to make this up as you go, there is nothing worse than trying to build the airplane while you're flying it. You don't want to be put in that situation. So have a plan ahead of time. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be on beautiful letterhead. You don't need to worry about embossed invitations. Don't go that far, but at least get something down on paper somewhere that people will have access to. People other than just singularly you will know where it is and understand what to do. And then number 3, provide some amount of autonomy to the people below you and give them some trust inside of that space when it comes to these sort of things. Because what happens, especially with workplace injury, is there's so much fear built through the leadership ladder to when we escalate it to a certain point, there is going to be anger or frustration or some amount of that emotion that I talked about earlier directed at the person reporting the problem, that what will occur is people hide the issue, or they won't report it, or they won't take proper notes or pictures or whatever of that incident happening. And now you're dealing with incomplete documentation. And so when we come to those situations where we go, hey, something has occurred. No, we don't have photos of it. No, we don't know who else was working on the floor at that time. It turns into a he said, they said situation. And so inside of that space, what occurs is everybody ends up pointing fingers at each other. And so when we look at that, have some amount of trust in your people and give them some power to go, hey, here's what we expect you to do. Here's what we need to do. I'm not going to be mad at you if you report this just for the sake of being safe. That's okay.
Right.
I'd rather you report it and it turn into, we're okay, but at least we got documentation for it. Great. That's better than we're into litigation and now we're trying to figure out who knew what. A little too late.
You just touched on the documentation. That was going to be my next question. How important is that? And that's for all the parties involved.
Absolutely.
And you've touched that on that a little bit.
Yeah. It's something that you say the word documentation on a physical therapist, you'll see most of them flinch. It's not a great word. And it's partially just because it's the bane of our existence, but because of a lot of these regulatory procedures are written in blood. That's why they exist. There was damage, there was harm done to someone, somebody died. There's a reason these things exist in our rules. Now, are there ways to have utilized outside tools and resources to make this better? Absolutely. There are a plethora of companies that have come in and gone, hey, we're utilizing AI to enhance this documentation piece, do this, that. Great. There's options out there. There are pieces that'll make it better. But if anything, that should be your indicator that the number one issue that we need to be focused on inside of this space is the documentation from everybody around the circle. Not just employer, not just manager, not just the employee. Everybody's got to have their documentation in line. Because when we do that, it makes this a much more cut and dried issue. And there's a lot less of this guessing. You don't ever want to be entering a situation with contracts where you're guessing. Horrible.
Yep. Looking back at your, career in the space, what habits or mindsets of an employee tend to produce the best outcomes?
Number one's going to be resiliency. Truthfully. And you're looking for people who can experience things, positive, negative, indifferent, and stay even keeled. And that's not to say we don't want people who don't bring their authentic selves to work. If you're in a place where you feel like you have to go to work and hide who you are, that usually ends up poorer for everyone. You're going to have poor outcomes. You're not going to feel safe. There has been entire libraries filled with pieces about that. So I'm not going to bang on about that. But when I'm looking inside of employee space and when I'm looking from that end, I'm looking for somebody who can respond to challenge with some amount of action rather than freeze. I think what happens, and I was in a very interesting period of time where I got to see, I tend towards elder millennial if you're sitting inside the generations, right? So I got to see these Gen Zers come up and everybody's banging on about Gen Zs. The Gen Zs don't know this, Gen Zs don't know that. They don't try hard, they don't care. It's tough because if you're a student of history, you recognize that they've had the exact same sort of things written by the Greeks 5,000 years ago. They're writing the same thing about their kids. They don't honor their mother. They don't care about education. It's just the same pattern repeating. So do we have more of a trumpet blowing that in our ears these days with social media? Absolutely. There are definitely those pieces there. But I think inside of that, when you're looking at your employees, figuring out ways to communicate with different levels, because the way someone's going to communicate with me versus somebody who's 10 years my junior or 10 years my senior are going to be very different. And that's okay. You're allowed to communicate in different fashions. You just need to make sure you're doing it in a way that's considered equitable and fair, and you're not making somebody feel othered because of that. And then I will leave you to the specialization inside of that space. But inside of that, I think that, again, like you've said early on, that communication piece, learning how to communicate between those different groups, absolutely key. Doesn't mean you need to let them call you bro in the office. You don't have to do that.
Yep. Understood. Well, listen, if someone is listening today and they've recently been injured, they don't know what to do, they're overwhelmed, what is your piece of immediate advice to them?
Seek out a professional. Inside of that space, seek out someone with credentials. That's what you're looking for. Unfortunately, the world is full of letters after names, which is hard. So when you're doing Google searches, everybody's got an alphabet soup after their name these days, which is difficult. So trying to sort through that on your own is often difficult. But inside of that space, what I would ask you to do is go, hey, do some research on your own and then ask the people around you. More often than not, parents, family members, neighbors, someone has dealt with some amount of injury in that ballpark before. Ask one of them what they did. And they'll either tell you an awesome story about how they got better and the person that fixed them, or they'll tell you the horror story and what you never need to repeat again in the future. Either way, you learn something. It just may not be the thing you're looking to learn at that moment.
Yeah. Man, that's great. I really appreciate you joining. It's been insightful today. It's been fantastic. Wonderful conversation.
Sure. Happy to help.
Obviously, I think a couple of takeaways that I have today is communication is key. The right mindset, resilience, and then seeking help early. That's Absolutely. One of the biggest takeaways as well. To our listeners, thank you very much for joining us again today on Crashes, Claims, and Clarity. If you have found this valuable today, please subscribe, leave a review, and make sure you share this episode with somebody that you know that might be going through this at this moment. That would be very, very, very helpful. Whether you're dealing with an injury, helping a loved one, staying informed, knowledge creates clarity. Thank you very much, Justin. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Absolutely, Darrell. Appreciate you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Crashes, Claims, and Clarity with attorney Darrell Burrow, founder of Burrow & Associates and a trusted advocate for over 30 years. If today's episode helped bring clarity or hope after an accident, be sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. To connect with Darrell or learn more, visit legalatlanta.com. Join us next week for another honest, faith-centered conversation about recovery, rights, and moving forward after injury.